Dr. Jacob Eisler joins me now, Associate Professor of Public Law at Southampton Law School. Jacob, thank you very much indeed for coming onto the programme. I don't know if, like me, like thousands of people watching the news last night, seeing those pictures unfold like a movie scene, what was your reaction?
To be honest, at this point, I'm primarily embarrassed. It's a surreal scene. The story has transitioned very quickly from there is a risk of insurrection or civil war to this is an egregious security failure. This mob was not made up of some sort of crack military unit. It was a group of protesters that the Capitol Security Forces should have been able to keep out of one of the most secure buildings in the world. How did they enter? I don't know, and there are a series of investigations beginning. The broader story here is that Trump is continuing to undermine American democracy, and he keeps going to every venue that he can. He tried his allies in Congress. They wouldn't help him. He tried the courts. They wouldn't help him. Finally, he turned to his most extreme supporters, and somehow they did what no other nation has been able to do, what did not happen during the Civil War. They breached the U.S. Capitol. It's baffling.
Where does the U.S. go from here, then?
So I think there are two stories here. In the short term, Biden will take office on the 20th. I think we'll see at least some signs of a return to normalcy. He's putting together a very professional cabinet. Looks like he'll lead a fairly typical Democratic government. The real question is, what does Trump do and what happens to Trump? Congress has decided to take a break until January 19th. That means Trump won't be impeached. He probably won't suffer any short-term consequences of his anti-democratic action. I think in the long run, we simply don't know. Will Trump stay involved in American politics? He's a showman. He'd love to. And he has really strong support among some Americans. Will he ultimately be prosecuted? Will he suffer legal or political consequences from this? Prosecuting former leaders is seen as typically a really bad move. It reeks of internal dissension within a country. It reeks of a failing democracy. They'll try to avoid that.
But it does seem extraordinary, though, doesn't it?
The fact that immediately after a rally that he held, his supporters stormed one of the most important buildings, arguably the most important building in U.S. government, is surreal. And looking at the broader response among U.S. commentators, it's sort of this shock. How could this happen? And if this continues, the U.S. government, the Biden administration, federal prosecutors will face a question. Do you try to take action to constrain Trump? Or do you hope that politics returns to normal? And I really don't know. I don't think anybody knows at this point. And that's what's truly unsettling. The event yesterday was a comic mishap in the long run. But is it a sign of something worse? I don't know.
What do you make of Joe Biden's reaction to the events yesterday?
I think it was very typical. It was relatively measured. He didn't call for any radical action. He said what he had to, which is that this is unacceptable. The protesters need to leave, and Trump needs to take a stronger stand as the man who still is leading the country. And he's doing a very bad job doing so. That's what's truly remarkable here. Even there's not been a single other president in U.S. history who's even come close to undermining civic unity like this. Compared to this, Nixon's decision to resign, for example, after Watergate, looks downright noble. Trump is an embarrassment at this point. I think what looks like the U.S. government is going to do, including Biden, is try and grit their teeth, buckle down, and hope January 20th gets here as soon as we can. Whether Trump will fade into history after January 20th, that's the big question.
I was going to say, do you think his supporters still have faith in him?
They clearly do, and if you look at the election, I would suspect that Trump has support of maybe a quarter of Americans still quite loyal to him. Not enough to win an election, but enough to remain a prominent force in the Republican Party. And that explains why even if Congress were sitting, there's no chance he'd be impeached. Enough Republican senators would not defect over to the Democratic side to support. Well, he might be impeached. He wouldn't be convicted through impeachment, just like happened before, because the Republicans recognize how popular he is, and they're afraid to turn on him. And I think that's the remarkable thing. And that will be the real question. When he leaves office, will he retain that popularity? Will other prominent Republicans remain loyal to him?
Jacob, thank you very much indeed for your thoughts this afternoon. Dr. Jacob Eisler, Associate Professor of Public Law at Southampton Law School.